Welcome to Wednesday night's edition of Detroit in Black and White. We've got a small crew, but a good one. Tonight we've got Jim Nardone, former police chief of Trenton, and we've got Eric Brown, who's a literacy advocate who likes to be promoted as a shit starter or whatever. Anyways, there's a lot going on this week and a lot going on today, really. With all the confirmations going on. We can talk about the outrages of the week. I've got one actually local, but why don't we start with Jim? Anything you'd like to start us off with?
Well, let's start with this. It's January 15th, and January 15th, 1929, Martin Luther King Jr. was born, historic figure. And another man that we know was born on January 15th. So if you know this man and if you see him walking around tonight, maybe wish him a happy birthday. Maybe you can talk to us online tonight. His name is Adolph Mongo. And today
is it Adolph's birthday today?
Okay. And he would not be happy that I mentioned it, but I'm going to do it anyway.
All right. Happy birthday to Adolph Mongo, who I've known since 7th grade. Adolph always tells a story about we were in 7th grade together, and we had the same social studies class, but I had it first hour, he had it later in the afternoon, and there were 50 questions, and the teacher at the end, after we handed it in, she said, the answers are all true, but don't tell anyone else because I'm giving the same test to everyone else. And so I saw Adolph in the hall, and I walked by and I said, all true. And Adolph was like, do I trust this white boy? He goes, I don't know, man. And so Adolph did 48 out of 50 true, and he aced the test, obviously. So
if he's out there somewhere and you see him tonight, make sure he makes it home safely. That's all I ask of any of our viewers. And if you have his phone number, text him tonight and wish him a happy birthday. I had a little story I kind of wanted to tell and get your thoughts and maybe our viewers' thoughts and how politics are connected, right? We all want to know who's connected to who when we look at offices. Back in March of 2020, Deadline Detroit covered a story, and I'm just going to read it to you, the first couple lines. It says, a Detroit official tied to an ongoing criminal investigation over deleted emails is leaving city employment. So the gentleman I'm talking about, his name, and this is not a bad story. This is not a critical story. I just think it's an interesting story. The gentleman's name is Ryan, I guess, Fredericks. He's a Harvard grad. He was the chief development officer. And at that time, in March of 2020, he left the city of Detroit to work for a gentleman named Stephen M. Ross, the real estate billionaire, to help develop an innovation center in Detroit with Dan Gilbert. Fredericks is an attorney. He works for Related Companies LLP. It's a $60 billion company that was founded with $10,000 and a loan from his mother by Stephen M. Ross. And if you're unfamiliar with Stephen Ross, this Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan, Stephen Ross gave about $478 million to the University of Michigan. About, I guess that's $500 million almost. Is that how that plays out?
Yeah, and he's also the owner of the Miami Dolphins.
Yes, and his wife is quite accomplished too. I'm not sure if you guys if our viewers are familiar with Mr. Frederick's wife. She's a very accomplished law school grad from Harvard. She worked for the Southern Poverty Law Center. She was a dean of the Wayne State School of Law, the same school of law that Stephen Ross went to, at 35 years old. In 2016, she went to work for a company, a nonprofit, which is really interesting. If you get a chance, it's called RISE. It's the Ross Initiative in Sports for Equality. She became the CEO of that, and then she was elected in Michigan here. Her name is Jocelyn Benson. So I think what's interesting about this is there's connections everywhere. So we've been talking a lot about Mike Duggan and his effort to be elected and why he stepped away from the Democratic Party. And I guess my question to our viewers and to you gentlemen is that why Mike Duggan potentially went independent?
I don't think, I don't think the connections at all have anything to do with whether he went independent. She's connected. Stephen Ross is the money man, but I think it was a combination of one. I mean, he probably worried about whether he could beat her in the primary. And then number two is that I think he sort of tried to capitalize on the weakness of the Democratic Party showing in the presidential election. And this I think he sort of interpreted it as maybe people were tired of the parties. They were dissatisfied with both candidates. And he thought, how about an independent candidate there? So I that's just my read. You may have a different read on that. Eric, I don't know.
I mean, one of the most untold stories that did not get played out by the local media was the fact that Alyssa Slotkin stated that she was not going to be campaigning with Harris, Vice President Harris. And the reason why she said that was her internal numbers had been showing Harris being underwater in Michigan. So the Democratic Party is so fractured right now, and they are in denial. You still have a outgoing president that think he could have won the election. I'm not sure what planet he's living on right now, but that was a telltale sign. And for whatever reason, the media chose not to talk about that. I'm not sure they didn't talk about it because they didn't want more people not voting Democrat. But then I found out recently, one of the most interesting stories that's not being reported on is that 90% of the counties all across America shifted away from the Democratic Party. Now, that does not mean that the Democrats did not win some of those counties. It just means that in 90% of the counties all across America, the Democrats got less votes than they did 4 years ago. Well, and that speaks volumes.
Well, let me ask you, I mean, what are the questions? I mean, look, the Democrat people are quick to dismiss, like say the Democratic Party's dead, the Republican Party's dead. But, you know, look, Trump won in 2016. And after that, there was a blue wave, really, in a lot of parts of the country. 2018, 20, 22 in Michigan was dominant. And a lot of it had to do with that people were sick of Donald Trump.
Right. They were sick of him.
Yeah. Somehow the resurgence of Donald Trump, and then suddenly people, you know, the Democratic Party wasn't getting as much labor backing as, and the question really becomes, is it the party or is it the candidate that is not bringing home the bacon, so to speak?
What's the combination of both? If 90% of the counties in America shifted away from the Democratic Party as far as votes over years, when it comes to 2020, 2022, then come 2024, there's a reason why it wasn't just a candidate, it's the party itself. And that's one of the things that they're going to have to grapple with going forward in 2026 and 2028. Well, and it's no different than why the Eastern Michigan University came up with the topic to kick off Black History Month next month of what's the history of the blacks in elections. And I think that's a very legitimate topic.
But I think history also, let's not forget that, like Reagan, you know, we had in Macomb County, the Reagan Democrats, and the Democratic Party was losing out. You know, we're talking about working blue collar, you know, workers who were going Republican twice. You know, I think, you know, Reagan, I believe, won Michigan twice. And
probably, yeah, he did, but that was also a result of, I think that had more to do with him, the candidate, than the Republican Party when Reagan won both times, because he did well all across America with Democrats. No different than this election. Trump, for whatever reason, I mean, look at Georgia. Georgia was a bastion for Democratic votes, and Trump won Georgia due to the lack of turnout from the black electorate in Georgia.
Look at Nixon. Look at Nixon in 1972 against McGovern. I think McGovern only won like what, Massachusetts, DC, and maybe one other state, if that much. So I mean, it's sort of, I think what I'm just trying to point out is that I think sometimes we're very dismissive of parties, like we're losing it all, and it does. I mean, the parties have to work to get it back. There's no question about it. But it's not like, you know, it's like, forget it. The Democratic Party is never going to get labor again. The Democratic Party is never going to get as much of the black vote, Hispanic or whatever. But I mean, it is interesting. I think we sort of assume the black vote is going to go Democratic. We assume the Hispanic vote, which we're seeing that there's a lot of, there's a lot of conservative Hispanics, and even in the black community, when we talk about the church, I mean, abortion, some of the other issues there are not as liberal as people think.
So I just wanted to mention that we're not talking about winning a lot of times. In Detroit, I think Donald Trump in 2020 received 7,500 votes, somewhere like that, and in this last election, he received about 20,000 votes out of 270,000 cast. So we're talking maybe 10%, but those are where he made a lot of these little gains, right? Instead of getting 5,000 votes in a community, he got 10,000 or whatever the case is.
Right.
He didn't win. He didn't win Detroit by any means. When you're talking about 10%, that's a pretty small minority.
But when you take into consideration the amount of votes he got versus the lack of turnout,
sure,
because people would assume had people turned out, they would have voted for the Democratic candidate. That adds up to a victory for him in the Republican Party, because there was something about the candidate on the Democratic side that was not impressive enough for more than 47.2% of the people to come out. It makes no sense when people complain the way that they do, and only 47% of the people come out to vote. That is a telltale sign on not just the party, but also the candidate.
Look, when I was on the day of the election, I went over to the polling over on Warren near I-75, which is the place where I normally vote. And I interviewed 9 people, and I did a video for Deadline Detroit. 9 people. There were 8 were black, 1 was white. Of 3, 2 said they voted for Trump. A third wouldn't say, which made me assume that he probably voted for Trump. So 3 out of 9 voters in Detroit. And I started to think, that's a lot, randomly for 3 out of 9 people in the city of Detroit to be voting for Trump. I thought that gave me pause for really thinking that Kamala had a shot. And and then we did an interview a couple weeks before that at a barbershop on Puritan, and most of the people said they were voting for Kamala, but some were like, I'm voting for her, but I'm not 100% sold on her. And that was the feeling I got when in 2016, I was at Western High School. I interviewed a Hispanic woman, and I said, who did you vote for? And she said, I voted for Hillary. And I said, did you vote for Hillary or did you vote against Trump? She said, I voted against Trump. She said, the choice for me was between the flu and cancer. I voted for the flu. And when I heard that, I thought, that is not a ringing endorsement. So,
and that's the same thing this past election. I mean, there's no, and we need not talk about the amount of money that was spent or wasted or people that got rich behind all this, but that just goes to show that you just can't bring entertainers in thinking that that's how low level of the thought you have for the black electorate that you think you can impress them by bringing in Meg Thee Stallion, Beyonce, Glorilla. I mean, come on, really?
I think what had a much bigger impact in the community, and one of the voters I talked to, was the transgender ads that they bombarded us with like 5 times a day. And I think that, those were effective ads for it. But before we go on, let's take a commercial break and we'll come right back.
In the heart of Detroit, Bruce Simpson. Our city ombudsman and his team are dedicated to making your voice heard. The City of Detroit Ombudsman is a liaison between the City of Detroit and all persons who have a complaint or inquiry into the operation of a city department or the conduct of a city employee. The Ombudsman works as an independent oversight to provide individuals with an opportunity of giving a confidential avenue to address complaints. You can reach the Ombudsman's office at 313-224-6000 or email us at ombudsmandetroitmi.gov. You can also visit us at the Coleman A. Young Municipal Center. For more information, go to www.detroitmi.gov and type in Ombudsman we are here to help. In Detroit, we are all one team. When you win, we all win.
Hi, I'm Eric Sabri, your Wayne County Treasurer. If you're living in a home of a deceased family member and you're facing property tax foreclosure, the probate process can be helpful to you. If you file a probate petition and notify our office, the foreclosure proceedings will be halted during the probate process. Contact us at 313-224-5990 or email us at taxinfo@waynecounty.com. We're here to help.
All right, we are back. Detroit in black and white on Wednesday's edition. We're missing a couple people, but we've got the core here. Eric, do you want to talk about a outrage of the week? Or
I mean, it's a redundant outrage from years and years of confirmation hearings. You know, no matter who or what party is in control. I mean, these confirmation hearings are, I mean, sanctimonious, self-righteous. At the end of the day, no matter if you like the president, which side of the aisle, all this pomp and circumstance on dogging the nominee when chances are they're going to get, you know, confirmed is just ridiculous. And it's the same thing when you had Justice Brown, then you had Sotomayor. I mean, it doesn't matter. Whoever the person is being nominated, the opposing party, you know, you have every opportunity prior to the hearing to meet with the person. And if they choose not to meet with you, there's no need to try to embarrass them when they are before the world stage. And it's just a watch, rinse, and repeat, you know, every year. I mean, every 4 years. It's just ridiculous.
I'd say, you know, I did see one little clip from Marco Rubio's hearing where Cory Booker, a Democrat, really complimented Marco Rubio in ways and said, you're qualified for this job. You bring a lot to it. That was probably more the exception. I did watch some of the watch Secretary of Defense thing. I think there's some disturbing. He's got a disturbing resume, and he washes it out by saying, "Jesus, my savior. I'm the new guy," you know. And then the other thing was Pamela Bondi, who did, I thought, pretty well. She was attacked, but I think it's important for her to make sure they put on the record that she, you know, they're trying to say you will be able to say no to Donald Trump if he wants you to investigate somebody. Is that correct? It does, as I agree with you, it becomes very like each, you know, the Democrats beat them up and then the Republicans prop them up and they say, you know, with Pete Hegseth, and says, well, how many push-ups can you do? And can you tell us how much you love your wife and your kids? And so
how many bullets in a certain type of mag and all that? Yeah, I mean, that was
it becomes like, it is a lot of bullshit. But
I mean, with Pete, if I was a senator, he would not get my vote. I don't think he's qualified is subjective, but he just wouldn't get my vote. I mean, it's just too many issues. And I thought that Gary Peters did a good job of his line of questioning when he's talking about the qualifications and how many people what's the most amount of people you ever had under your ranks versus this is a department with hundreds of thousands of people. So that was a good line of questioning. But then the guy that come behind him to ask about the qualifications for a senator, it's ridiculous because qualification for a senator and qualification for Secretary of Defense is apples and oranges.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So my outrage of the week is I wrote a story this week in Deadline Detroit, which you can see. There was a guy named Tony Ray Cox, 33 years old, 6 foot, 390 pounds, a black man, was an engineer for one of the auto companies, lived in Sterling Heights. And Tony was, you know, part of the outrage is that we're only really hearing a little more about the case because a lawsuit was filed in federal court last week. And basically what happened is Tony gets pulled over in December of 2023. And you know, it's been more than a year now. It's pulled over by the sheriff's deputies in Pontiac who have jurisdiction there. And they pull him over, and he's like, "What's?" He's got his hand on the wheel. He says, "What's the issue?" They say, "Well, this car was used. We have a description of a car similar to this, was used in a gunshots fired last week out of an apartment complex in Pontiac." Well, he knows nothing about it, and so then more cops come, and they start shining flashlights in his car, looking for any guns or anything. They don't find anything. He tells he gets nervous. There's so many cops there, and then they're all they draw their guns, and he's like, tells one of the cops, he goes, "I feel like I'm going to get killed." He gets nervous. He drives off. He takes off. They go chasing him a short while. They do one of these maneuvers, whatever. Jim probably knows what. Sometimes
maneuvers.
Yeah. And so they stop him. He gets out of the car, and for unbeknownst what reason, he gets out of the car, doesn't have a weapon, but he takes a stance like this and points toward the sheriff's deputies. Well, they shoot him multiple times in each arm, in the hip, and he still is able to take off running. As he's running, they shoot him in the back 9 times. And so the lawyers said, we finally filed a lawsuit in federal court because they wouldn't release the video. They let us come in and watch just a snippet of the video. They wouldn't release any report. We don't know anything about the investigation. Well, I did a story. They issued a statement to me, which the lawyers hadn't even seen before, saying that an internal investigation was conducted by this sheriff's department, Oakland County, and by the Ingham County Sheriff's Department, and they found that the shooting was justified. The autopsy report shows he was not only shot multiple times in the front, but while he was taking off 9 times. And the question really becomes I was like, holy shit, how is this still being so secretive? I mean, at that point, normally, if the police will, it's a year's gone by, they will release the video showing justification for shooting somebody. And Jim, maybe you can address it in terms of shooting. What's the policy if somebody's running? What's
the video belongs to the people of the community. It does not belong to the police department. The police officers work for the community. They don't work for some independent agency, right? So there needs to be transparency. You can't shoot anybody in the back. That was a 1975 ruling. I can't think of it right now. Tennessee v. Gardner. You cannot shoot people in the back, especially people that, unless they are a threat to somebody. And it doesn't appear by your story.
He had no weapons that there was nothing fired. It wasn't as if he fired at them and then ran off and he was running with the gun. He just was scared for his life, apparently.
But you mentioned autopsy, so he died? He got killed?
Yeah, he died. And one of the bullets came from the back and it pierced his aorta. And that's the bullet that put him down. I mean, he's a big guy. So I get, but, so the question really becomes like, how can a department like that just kind of brush that aside? And really kind of questionable, like, why has this not been in the news? It's a year ago.
Right.
And part of that is probably, look, back in the day, the Oakland Press, I mean, they still do some stuff. I subscribe to it only because for Deadline Detroit to kind of monitor it. But, there's just not enough reporters reporting on it. But here's a shooting that just falls through the cracks. And now it's just coming to light. CBS Detroit, after I wrote the story, they did a story, and I think the Oakland Press is working on a story.
So what's the status of the officers that were involved in the shooting?
Nothing happened. They issued a statement to me on Monday and said that they had investigated and they found the shootings justified. So I assume,
So the state police did an investigation?
Or no, it was an internal investigation. In fact, I'll read you their response here. The incident is by the Oakland County Sheriff's Department. It says the incident was investigated by the Oakland County Sheriff's Office Special Investigations Unit and the Ingham County Sheriff's Office. Both entities found that the actions of the deputy sheriffs were objectively reasonable under the circumstances. And so I asked, and I said, well, the person who issued the statement to me, I said, well, what about the 9 gunshots? And this was a spokesman, so he wasn't going to go out beyond the 4 corners of what he had said. But I said, what about the 9 shots fired in the back? And he goes, that's all we're going to say. And to me, I don't know how you justify that. 9. I could see the shots where he takes a stance, doesn't fire anything, but they think maybe it's dark out. It's it's nighttime. Maybe they thought he had a gun. But when the guy is running and
away from you,
away from you, and you just all these deputies just open fire and just lay the guy out like that, I think it's disturbing.
What's troubling to me is the investigation, and I don't want to speak to the facts of the case because I obviously don't know anything about the facts. However, it's always best to get an independent evaluation of a case that you're involved in, and I'm not sure Ingham County would be as independent,
right, in
an investigation as the state police or even the Department of Justice. In a case like that, it could be
the FBI that would could
well, they go all the way to Ingham County when it was Oakland County. And why did they not use the state police and use
that would be my question.
Monroe County as the investigating county as opposed to Ingham? And
that's not attacking. That's not attacking the Oakland County Sheriff's or the Ingham County Sheriff's Department. Detroit has very good investigators, but they're probably going to call the state police if there's a shooting.
Yeah. I mean, normally Bouchard, I always think of him as sort of being above board, but I don't know what happened in this instance. Why they, as you say, either Michigan State Police or or a civil rights investigation. Correct. Where the FBI, the Justice Department would come in and investigate. I have a feeling now that it's coming more to the surface that we may see more. I submitted a Freedom of Information request today for any video, any photos, any investigative reports, and we'll see if they respond to that. But
Thanks to Cynthia, Derek, DMC 2021. Thanks to everybody out there watching tonight. We appreciate it. If you have anything if you have a question or you think we're going down the wrong way, the wrong path, please let us know. So
I watched a little bit of before we came on. I was watching Biden's speech, and what I did find
why.
I want
I want to look. Maybe there's some sentimental stuff, history or whatever, but he talked about oligarchs, sort of taking over the country.
Yes.
He talked about the press, freedom of speech. He talked about the declining, numbers in the press and stuff like that. And I think it's it's an important issue there. So
I think he sent an interesting message to the American public, and you're probably not going to like this. A lot of people probably won't like what I have to say here, but this isn't a message about Joe Biden. This is a message about everybody that's watching, everybody that's on this show. Don't live your life like somebody's gaining on you, right? If you run a 100-yard dash, you look over your shoulder, the guy's going to go by you. So what he did tonight, and my observation is, he let the people of this country know that he couldn't do his job for the last 4 years because he was looking over his shoulder to see who was gaining on him. And that's really unfortunate. That's the message that I got that was troubling to me. It's sad to think
I didn't get that message.
If you're the CEO of General Motors, or if you're running a Walmart or a restaurant, don't look behind you to see who's coming up behind you. Full steam ahead and do what you need to do, and don't worry about the other people. That's my message.
I didn't get that. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I didn't get that from him. I thought he was trying to throw some caution to the wind and tell people, hey, we're starting a new chapter. Look, for whatever, Trump, I hope he succeeds. I hope he does well for the sake of the country. But as far as the media and stuff like that, it's a very hostile environment for the media. And it's really, as a reporter, I get a sense, and somebody who did some coverage for this election, is that I don't think people really cared about facts in a lot of these elections. People voted with emotion. They voted with what they perceived, rightly or wrongly. And I'm not saying it was wrongly, but I don't think facts were really important. I don't think it mattered if anything was either candidate was exposed for doing certain things. I think people were just like, I don't care. I'm voting for this person. So it's a different time that as a reporter, it seems to me a different time that I haven't seen, So, but
it's definitely a different time. I mean,
yeah, it's scary. And the other big thing today was the Gaza, the hostage situation, and we'll see how that all plays out. I think it's a great step forward. I mean, it's sad the damage that's been done in Gaza, the damage that's been done to the Israeli people and the psyche and the hostages, who I'm sure will never be the same again. And I'm sure, a lot of people in Gaza who are traumatized by war. It's a fucked up region. It's a region that needs a lot of psychiatric help, a lot of traumatized people from every facet of that whole thing. But anyway, I guess we'll see. But anyways, we're going to close it up. So we'll go around the horn once for last thoughts. Jim, any final thoughts?
Thanks, everybody. Thanks that you don't like my music for tuning in. Thank you for all the viewers. And I'm just happy to be here.
Eric, any?
Likewise, the days will be interesting. All we could do is hope that the day we have tomorrow become the day after tomorrow, and so on.
I think we're it's always interesting times, but these are, pretty tumultuous. I mean, really for the last year, I mean, when we look at everything that's going on from the election to the Middle East, to Ukraine, to all the stuff, to even New Orleans.
We live in history, just as Eric's talking about.
The fires in Los Angeles area. And that's another thing. Climate change is something that I remember they asked an insurance agent, do you believe in climate change? And he was a Republican. He goes, are you kidding me? He goes, look at all the payouts we've had in the last 5 years. Do you think that's a coincidence? So, but anyways, we'll be back Friday night at 8:30. I want to thank Jim Nardone and Eric Brown. It's great. We pulled off the show here. So anyways, everybody have a good night, and we'll see you hopefully Friday evening.
Hey, Marlon.